Coming up, we have one of the OGs of Native American restaurants find out what's cooking at Denver-based Tocabe, and an Arizona history professor grapples with issues felt by Indigenous families at the southern border. Plus, on this week's IndigiPolitics, we're less than 200 days away from a presidential election. John Tahsuda has the latest. Next on the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Support for the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez comes from the Arizona PBS studios in Phoenix at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University.
Amidawa Hopa. Thank you for joining us. I am Aaliyah Chavez. We begin today in Montana with history in the making. President Joe Biden has nominated Dana Jackson to serve as a federal judge in the United States District Court for the District of Montana. Jackson is from the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, where she currently serves as a tribal attorney. If confirmed by the U.S. Senate, Jackson would be the first Native American, Alaska Native, or Native Hawaiian person to serve as a federal judge in Montana. It would also make her the fifth active Native American federal district court judge in the country. We head north now to Alaska, where youth from across the state participated in the Native Youth Olympics. The three-day event celebrates Indigenous culture in the form of games that mimic hunting and survival techniques. ICT's Mackenzie Allen Charmley shares how it's part of what Alaska Natives have relied on for thousands of years in the Arctic.
The athletes filling a huge gym in Anchorage, Alaska, were ready to compete for the chance to claim the state's top prize in their events at the Native Youth Olympics. The statewide competition attracts hundreds of teenage Alaska Native athletes each year and pays tribute to the skills and techniques used by their ancestors to survive in the harsh polar climate. Nicole Johnson is the head official for the event and one of Alaska's most decorated Native athletes.
We play these games today to help preserve our culture and our heritage, and to teach our youth how difficult life used to be, and to share our culture with everyone around us who wants to know more about our people.
Events at the competition include a stick pull, meant to mimic holding on to a slippery seal as it fights to return to the water, and a modified four-step broad jump that approximates leaping across ice floes on the frozen ocean.
The next game we're doing is the Eskimo stick pull, also called the Inuit stick pull. This game demonstrates and builds the skills hunters needed every day for pulling seals out of the water up onto the ice.
For generations, Alaska Natives played these games to develop the skills they needed to become successful hunters and survive in an unforgiving climate. For scissor broad jump world record holder Colton Paul, the sport connects him to his culture.
Doing the sports has really made me had a sense of my ancestors did this, and I'm doing what they did as survival. And I'm really happy that it's contributed into a game and just something fun to do.
For ICT News, Mackenzie Allen Charmley.
Well, Oklahoma City Thunder basketball player Lindy Waters III has been named a finalist for the NBA Social Justice Champion Award. The Kiowa and Cherokee citizen has made incredible efforts through his foundation and has elevated Native basketball tournaments that take place in Oklahoma. The Kareem Abdul-Jabbar Trophy and the NBA Social Justice Champion recognizes players who are driving change, inspiring others to reflect on injustice and take collective actions in their communities. The winner will be announced sometime during the 2024 NBA playoffs.
This year's presidential election is essentially a repeat of 4 years ago. A key difference is who former President Donald Trump will select as his vice president and What is Robert F. Kennedy's impact on Trump's voter base? Here to talk more about that is ICT regular contributor John Tahsuda. He's a principal at Navigators Global on this week's IndigiPolitics. Welcome back to the newscast, John.
Thanks for having me again. It's always great to chat with you.
So the first question that I have is, when do presidential candidates normally announce their vice president?
Well, they each follow sort of their own trend, and often has to do with the politics in that particular year, that particular campaign. In a campaign where the candidate is not either an incumbent or hasn't run before, they usually wait until sometime around the convention so that it sort of builds this excitement going into the convention and then launching out of it for sort of the final months of the campaign. In this case, we essentially have two incumbents, so it's more unusual than it's been in quite a long time. So I suspect that former President Trump, candidate Trump, will probably pick one before the convention, maybe well before the convention, because it doesn't seem to have the same sort of resonance as an unknown candidate running for the first time. He's well known, and in many ways, the vice president pick in this campaign for him will not be viewed so much as adding a voter base or some other element that he doesn't already have tapped into. They're sort of more just, more like a vice presidential running mate who's already, been there before, an incumbent in a sense, so already well known, et cetera. So very different than it often is in a campaign for the non-current incumbent.
And who are some of the people that are being discussed?
Well, interesting, there's a wide roster, and sort of similar to his days on reality TV, former President Trump, likes to have a lot of folks in play. And so I think that adds a little bit to the sort of the drama of it. But it also keeps an interest in his voter base, et cetera. So again, the choice I think looked at is not looking necessarily to fill in some perceived gap, in his voter base or something. So, looking around, you might look at, interestingly, folks who previously were not favorites of his, like Marco Rubio in Florida. But, from news accounts anyways, it would appear that Mr. Rubio has sort of found favor again and is saying things that the former president thinks will maybe enhance his message. So there's a few folks like that. Interestingly, there are some candidates from states that you wouldn't normally look to in a normal campaign, like in the Dakotas, both South Dakota and North Dakota. They're not. Those are not states generally thought of as swaying the election one way or the other. They're sort of firmly in the Trump camp as states go. They're not. There's not a lot of electoral votes there, so that's not normally where you look. But again, different time, different campaign. There's certainly an element to having a woman as a running mate, and so there's been a lot of discussion about the governor of South Dakota, but there's also been a lot of attention to the governor of North Dakota, Mr. Burgum, and to the extent that Indian country is interested. I would say Mr. Burgum has really developed a lot better relationship with the tribes in North Dakota than the governor in South Dakota. So that would be an interesting pick. There may be some sort of melding of the minds there too. Both he and former President Trump are businessmen. So there's some similarities possibly in how they look, and that may be part of what President Trump likes in what Mr. Burgum is saying. There's also a strong interest in energy policy for the country. And so I think those are elements that sort of mesh with him. So again, the notion being not so much bringing a voter base, but bringing a consistent message that will help amplify the message of candidate Trump.
There's been some reporting about Robert F. Kennedy's campaign having an impact on Trump's voter base. What's your take on this?
I actually think it's probably a bigger problem for President Biden. If you look at the platform that Mr. Kennedy has put forward, in some ways he is really true to his uncle, John F. Kennedy, and a lot of his platform basis, and that's part of the appeal he's making. That appeal would really look to peel off those sort of moderate Democrat voters that Mr. Biden really, really has to keep in the camp. I know a lot of attention is paid to young and progressive voters, and certainly he'll need those to get over the top. But if he were to lose that moderate vote to a third party candidate, that would probably doom his campaign. So you look specifically things like border policy. Mr. Kennedy, as a candidate, says that he would like to first, take care of the border, address the illegal immigration, and then look to do something like comprehensive immigration reform, change immigration laws, et cetera. That sort of sounds to me something that would appeal to your moderate, middle of the road Democrat. They are concerned about the chaos at the border, but they don't want an unfair system. They perceive it as unfair now. So looking forward to a new system would be something that might appeal to those kind of voters. And that's just one example, I think, in his platform.
And do you think that the TikTok ban will have an impact on young voter engagement?
That's a really good question. I don't know that it will impact their engagement as far as their being for one candidate or another. But the real question, and this is the concern I think that has been exhibited at Washington, D.C., is how TikTok itself could influence outcomes by trying to sway voter opinion one way or the other instead of just presenting sort of candidate messages, et cetera, as normal media does. So I think that, again, not so much to sway the voter itself, but to sort of sway voter thinking. And that's a concern that has really been exhibited here in Washington, D.C. with the recent law passed.
Well, that's all the time that we have, John. Thank you again for being on the newscast.
Thank you.
For tribal nations on the U.S. Mexico border, it has been a struggle for families with relatives in two countries. They say the present-day border stands in the way of ceremony and everyday relationships. ICT's Shirley Sneve talks to Professor David Martinez about this. He's part of the Institute for Transborder Indigenous Nations.
David Martinez, I'm so happy you could join us on the ICT Newscast.
A pleasure to be here.
I was really interested in one of the classes that you're teaching, Contemporary Indigenous Spirituality.
Yes.
What was that class about?
It's about the work that we're all doing as community members, community leaders, in restoring and revitalizing, our ancestral traditions, not only in terms of language and ceremony, which are immensely important, but also in terms of how we bring these values into our everyday lives. As academics, as professionals, every aspect of contemporary Indigenous life. How do we maintain our kinship ties, to each other so that we fulfill our responsibilities to one another, and how do we, remember to stay connected to our Creator? These are challenges that we face all the time, and we've been facing them since the beginning of colonization and the reservation system began.
And one of the things that you face there in Arizona is the border. In fact, you're involved in the Institute for Transborder Indigenous Nations. Tell us about that.
I embarked on this initiative because it became really apparent to me during the Trump years when the border wall crisis was reaching an intensity that we hadn't seen before. Amidst all of the uproar over what this wall was doing to the environment, what it was doing to people's human rights, regardless of background, when it came to the O'odham, especially Thon O'odham and Hyachet O'odham, and related to both communities, it was really apparent to me that a lot of Americans were only hearing about us for the first time. that the border is actually Indian land, and that there are still Indian people who are impacted by this political imposition.
And what does that do to a tribe's concept of nationhood? I mean, you've got relatives south of the border, right?
I do. I do. And they're relatives that, in my case, I haven't seen in a long time. And I haven't seen them in a long time, not because, they're forbidden from traveling up or I'm forbidden from traveling down, but the impact of a militarized border is that it curtails, it diminishes the amount of contact that you have with both sides of your family.
I'm in Nebraska, and I'm pretty far from the border. However, my governor, Pillen, sent National Guard down to the border, and I am from South Dakota, and Governor Noem sent the National Guard down to the border. What is that like?
Well, you just feel under siege. I mean, if you're a Native person, if you're a Mexican person, even if you were born and raised in the United States, you're still connected, by blood and culture, to people on both sides of the border. So when political leaders like the governors you named, are sending armed troops down to your homeland, I don't care who says they're in political control of Arizona, this is all them land. So when you hear that armed troops are being sent down to the border, they're really being sent down to occupy your homeland. And why are they here? They want to police people who look a lot like you. And so I do not feel safe in my own backyard.
And we're also hearing about drug cartels too.
Yeah, it's a problem. I mean, it is the case, and it's documented that unfortunately we do have community members, who give in to the temptation for what they think will be easy money. And so as added to the social issues that we as sovereign nations have to address. And it's also created a political problem for us in getting back to the way in which the border has divided our community. One of the reasons why, say, all of them north of the border won't travel as much to the south as they would like is because all of them, like other people, other Americans, they're apprehensive that they're going to be entering into cartel country, cartel territory. And so people have become fearful. It's just added to the very tense race relations between the U.S. and Mexico, and all of them have been swept up in that.
Mai maka'u I kahana, maka'u I kamoloa. Mai maka'u I kahana, maka'u I kamoloa. Don't be lazy. Mai maka'u I kahana, maka'u I kamoloa. Don't fear work, fear laziness.
It has been 16 years since our next guest opened the doors to a new concept restaurant in Denver, Colorado. Since then, Ben Jacobs and Matt Chandra have fed the community with indigenous-sourced foods. ICT's Shirley Sneve has more for us.
It's been a journey, right?
It has been a journey, yeah. We started in we were young and unaware of many things in the world, like a recession. So we started in the middle of a recession, which was difficult, and then made it through the hurdles of opening a restaurant and then opening a second restaurant in a food truck, and then a global pandemic. So we have been in many ways through the ringer, but it helps you become, a more skillful, adaptable business owner. So yeah, those things looking back were definitely benefits to us.
So what kinds of things do people order? What are the most popular things that you sell in the restaurant?
We are considered a fast casual concept, so we are counter service. And again, the reason that we did that beginning is because the food needs to be open and available and accessible for everyone at a good price point. And so that's why we went that route. It needs to be open for families, youth, all the way, through every age. So we started with that. So people get to choose their base. Our most popular are the Indian tacos and wild rice grain bowls with braised bison and ground bison. Then we have a variety of toppings. Our Osage hominy, salsa or relish, which is hominy, onions, cranberries, cilantro, and a bunch of seasonings, is kind of our signature salsa. And then we have other things that rotate yearly. One of our most popular, I would say, is our bison ribs, where we rotate between huckleberry barbecue sauce, blackberry barbecue sauce, blueberry barbecue sauce.
Fry bread gets a bad rap because of its, colonialism origins. So why do you guys have that on the menu?
When we started this plan in 2006-ish, when we started really discussing through it, was what is a native restaurant and what is native cuisine? If you ask us today, what is native cuisine? I still don't think we know, not us, but in general, because as I always say, that we are the oldest cultures on the continent, but in many ways have the youngest cuisine because we're reclaiming that and adapting and creating it currently, which is a really exciting time to be in native foods. And it has been for the last, more than a decade for us specifically. But, when we were having that conversation is what is something that is somewhat cross-cultural for native communities? Obviously, we're not all the same. What is something that is kind of shared amongst? Fry bread is one of those things. But also that was the recipe that my grandmother gave and left. I was a grandma's boy when I was little, and she passed when I was young. And so for me, when we were discussing, that was our initial recipe. That was our foot in the door. That was our foot in the door for the public to come into the restaurant. But also that was a meaningful recipe. And so, as I always say, I don't shy away from it because it was left, it was given, and also it provided all the opportunity that we have in our lives. But I also think that we can't shy away from our past and we can't run from it. We can't hide it. Yes, it was due to contact, colonialism, forced relocation. Those are all terrible things. But also it's something that we created for ourselves. It's something that we hold on to that is still meaningful. So when people say it's not healthy, yes, I do agree. But I also say that neither is pizza, burgers, and French fries. We never shy away from fry bread. We will not. We think it's a part of the culture. It's a part of the community. And we think it's a part of resilience as well. So other people don't agree. Other people do. Everyone's has their opinion. But for us, it's very important from a personal level all the way through, a cultural, historical level.
Fry bread created an introduction into native cuisine and may have given an entry point for people to understand that native peoples are still here today and have them to go and learn about maybe their community in their backyard in the land that they are. So it's this gateway into hopefully understanding the connection and understanding that native peoples are still here today. And so
we have had people tear up when they've come in because it makes them feel a sense of home. And to me, that far surpasses the negativity behind the health consequence or the origin from it, because many origins come from disastrous situations. And I also think that some of the most amazing foods globally have come from people having to adapt to their environment and being, as we would say, colonized or consumed by other cultures. But it creates so much creativity and so much depth into why it's flavorful and meaningful. So
I wanted to talk to you about the harvest meals. Tell us why you guys decided to do that.
The core of Tocabe is making native foods available and accessible. And so something that we always want to do is make sure that we could get food, not just to people in the restaurant, but all over the country. That may be in the way of restaurants, but the most convenient way and the most accessible way is to get that to people's doors. Great thing is that's ingredients, but for us, that still is missing the gap of being able to provide the convenience that we wanted. So the harvest meals was always in our plan to create something that was microwavable or oven ready. And then it simplified the ingredient usage as well, because a lot of the ingredients that we source and traditional ingredients take time to cook. And so in the world that we all live in now, where we're busy, and we are looking for convenience, but we're looking for foods that are nutritious and benefit us from a health standpoint, we wanted to provide that to anyone across America. So that way you can have 13-hour braised bison, you can have tepary beans that take 8 hours to cook, you can have all those things within 5 minutes.
So what's next for you guys?
we're going to be we're opening a location in Denver International Airport, probably, Q3 of 24. So that's coming up. So I think it's going to be huge. It's going to be a representation in one of the largest, busiest airports in the globe.
Later this year, we will be launching Little Harvest, which is harvest meals that are directly for, our prepared meals, but are designed for kids. We will then be releasing Little Harvest for Tiny Tots, which is for toddlers. So again, what we're attempting to do is, one, not only provide meals and food to community members, but also make sure that we never miss anyone in the system. So not only thinking about adults and elders, but thinking about our teens, thinking about our youth, and thinking about our toddlers. But also for the youngest kids, and why we're really excited, is starting to build and adapt taste buds.
Well, Matt and Ben, thanks for joining us on the ICT Newscast.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Is anyone else hungry? Because I know I am. And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit us at ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.